At a quiet hour in East Texas, the lights never fully turn off. Behind concrete walls and steel doors, a small number of men live under a sentence that allows no release date, no transfer, and no expectation of freedom. This place is not hidden, yet it is rarely seen. It operates every day, under strict rules, away from public view. What does life actually look like inside Texas death row? And how did this prison become one of the most closely watched facilities in the United States? This documentary explores life on Texas death row inside the Allan B. Polunsky Unit, a maximum security prison operated by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Everything you will hear is based on verified public records, official policies, court documents, and long-term reporting. The purpose is not to judge individual cases, but to document how the system works, how it affects the people inside it, and how it reflects broader questions about punishment and justice in modern society. This is a factual examination of routine, structure, and consequence, told through real events and real conditions. This documentary is for educational and informational purposes only. All content is based on factual, research-driven information from public records, official documents, court filings, and reporting by reputable media and human rights organizations. No information is intentionally fabricated or exaggerated. Before we proceed, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. The Allan B. Polunsky Unit did not begin as Texas death row facility. When it opened in 1994 near Livingston, Texas, it was designed as a high-security prison meant to relieve overcrowding elsewhere in the state system. Its location was rural, surrounded by dense trees and long stretches of highway, far from major cities and public attention. By the late 1990s, Texas faced a logistical problem. Death row inmates were housed primarily at the Ellis Unit near Huntsville, but rising numbers, security concerns, and aging infrastructure made that arrangement difficult to sustain. In 1999, Texas officials made a critical decision. Male death row prisoners would be moved to Polunsky. This decision changed the purpose of the unit entirely. Polunsky was redesigned internally to support long-term isolation housing. Cells were reinforced. Movement was limited. Daily routines were standardized to reduce risk. From that point forward, Polunsky became synonymous with death row itself. Men sent there were not serving standard sentences. They arrived after years of trials, appeals, and confinement elsewhere. By the time they entered Polunsky, their legal status was fixed, convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death under Texas law. Daily life inside the unit followed a strict pattern. Inmates were housed alone in small cells. Meals were delivered through a slot in the door. Recreation, when permitted, occurred in enclosed spaces, separated from others. Contact with staff was controlled and procedural. Contact with other inmates was minimal to non-existent. These conditions were not temporary. Many men remained on death row for decades, as appeals moved slowly through state and federal courts. Some entered the unit in their 20s and aged into middle or old age within the same walls. Polunsky also became the final stop before execution. When the courts set an execution date, inmates were transferred from Polunsky to the Huntsville unit shortly beforehand, where the execution chamber is located. For those remaining behind, the absence left by that transfer was felt, even in silence. Over time, Polunsky gained a reputation beyond Texas. Legal experts, psychologists, and human rights observers began to examine the effects of long-term isolation used almost exclusively for death row inmates. Lawsuits challenged conditions. Policy reviews followed. Some practices were adjusted, but the core structure remained. The prison continued to operate quietly, with limited access for media and researchers. What happened inside was governed by written policy, but experienced personally by each inmate in a different way. As years passed, the questions surrounding Polunsky shifted. It was no longer only about punishment for crime, but about what prolonged waiting, isolation, and certainty of outcome do to the human mind, and what that means for a justice system that allows it. Life on Texas death row is defined less by events and more by repetition. At the Polunsky Unit, days are structured to remove uncertainty, movement, and contact. This structure is intentional. It is designed to maintain security in a facility that houses individuals convicted of the most serious crimes under state law. Each inmate is confined to a single-person cell for most hours of the day. The cell contains only essential items: a bed, a toilet, a sink, and limited personal property approved by policy. Doors remain closed, controlled electronically by correctional officers. Conversation between cells is discouraged and often physically impossible due to design. Meals arrive on a strict schedule. Food is prepared centrally and delivered through a slot in the door. There is no communal dining. This reduces interaction and potential conflict, but also removes one of the most basic social routines found in other prisons. Recreation is permitted, but it is highly restricted. When allowed, inmates are escorted individually to small, enclosed recreation spaces, sometimes referred to as exercise cages. These areas are surrounded by fencing and concrete. Time outside the cell is limited and closely monitored. Medical and mental health services are provided, but access is controlled. Appointments occur through cell-front interactions or escorted visits. Mental health professionals working in the unit have long documented the challenges of treating individuals held in near-total isolation for years at a time. Contact with the outside world is minimal. Visits, when approved, take place through glass partitions using phones. Physical contact is not permitted. Phone calls and mail are monitored according to prison regulations. Over time, many inmates lose consistent contact as family members move, pass away, or disengage. One of the defining features of death row is waiting. Unlike inmates serving life sentences, death row prisoners live with an uncertain timeline. Appeals can take decades, but the outcome is fixed unless a sentence is overturned. This combination, certainty of sentence with uncertainty of timing, creates a unique psychological environment. Former wardens and correctional staff have described Polunsky as quiet, controlled, and highly procedural. Every movement is documented. Every deviation is reviewed. This reduces violence, but increases emotional distance between staff and inmates, turning daily interactions into formal exchanges rather than human ones. Over time, patterns emerge. Some inmates withdraw completely, limiting communication and activity. Others maintain strict routines, exercise, reading, writing, as a way to impose structure on an environment where control is otherwise absent. These coping strategies are not taught, but developed individually. The system is designed to be stable, not adaptive. Changes come slowly, often only after court rulings or public scrutiny. For the men inside, this means daily life today often mirrors daily life from 10 or even 20 years earlier. But beneath this routine lies a deeper impact, one that cannot be measured only by policy manuals or security reports. And that impact begins to surface when we examine the psychological consequences of long-term death row confinement. Death row at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit is not only a physical space. It is a psychological environment shaped by prolonged isolation, strict control, and the constant awareness of a final outcome. Mental health experts have studied similar conditions across the United States, but Polunsky stands out because of the length of time many inmates remain there. In most prison settings, isolation is used temporarily, often as discipline or for safety reasons. At Polunsky, isolation is the default condition. Inmates live alone for years, sometimes decades, with minimal human interaction. This is not a short-term measure. It is built into the design of death row housing. Research in correctional psychology shows that extended isolation can affect attention, memory, emotional regulation, and perception. At Polunsky, these effects are not hypothetical. Court filings and expert testimony have documented symptoms such as anxiety, depression, difficulty concentrating, and emotional numbing among some inmates. The routine itself becomes a psychological force. Days are nearly identical. There are few meaningful choices. Even small decisions, when to eat, when to step outside the cell, when to speak, are made by the institution. Over time, this can weaken a person's sense of agency. Some inmates attempt to regain control through structure. They create daily schedules, exercise routines, or writing habits. Others focus on legal work, spending years studying case law and preparing appeals. These activities provide purpose, even when outcomes remain uncertain. Not all inmates respond the same way. Mental health staff report a wide range of behaviors, from withdrawal and silence to increased agitation. In rare cases, individuals may deteriorate to the point where their competency becomes a legal issue. raising complex questions for courts tasked with overseeing executions. Correctional officers working on death row also operate under psychological strain. They interact daily with individuals who are permanently confined and legally condemned. Professional distance is encouraged, but long-term exposure to the environment can affect staff morale and mental health as well. The system attempts to manage these pressures through procedure. Regular evaluations, written protocols, and oversight aim to maintain stability. But procedures cannot fully account for the human response to prolonged waiting under sentence of death. Over the years, these conditions have led to legal challenges. Attorneys have argued that extended death row confinement constitutes excessive punishment. Courts have reviewed these claims carefully, often acknowledging the harshness of the conditions while deferring to state authority. The debate remains unresolved. Is the psychological impact an unavoidable part of capital punishment, or is it an additional penalty imposed by design? That question becomes more complex when we examine how appeals and legal delays intersect with life inside Polunsky. For the men housed on death row at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit, the legal process does not end with a conviction. In many ways, it only begins there. Appeals are automatic in capital cases, and the system that reviews them moves slowly by design. After sentencing, each case enters a multi-layered review process. This includes direct appeals, state habeas corpus petitions, and federal court review. Each step is governed by strict procedural rules. Missing a deadline or failing to raise an issue at the right stage can permanently close a legal path. These proceedings often take years. Records must be assembled, trial transcripts reviewed, claims evaluated. Courts move cautiously because the sentence is irreversible. For inmates at Polunsky, this means living in suspension, confined under death sentence while legal activity happens far beyond the prison walls. Some inmates become deeply involved in their own cases. They read legal documents, write motions, and communicate regularly with attorneys. For others, legal representation is limited by funding, availability, or the complexity of the case. The level of engagement can shape how an inmate experiences daily life. Execution dates are not constant. They are set, delayed, withdrawn, and sometimes reset multiple times over the course of a case. When a date is scheduled, the psychological environment inside Polunsky shifts. Inmates are informed formally. Staff begin procedural preparations. Mental health evaluations are updated. If a stay is granted, life returns to routine. The date disappears, but the sentence does not. This cycle, anticipation followed by delay, can repeat many times. For some, it becomes one of the most stressful aspects of death row confinement. The prison itself does not control these timelines. Polunsky's role is custodial, not judicial, but the effects of the court system are felt daily inside its walls. Legal uncertainty becomes part of the environment, shaping behavior, mental health, and long-term planning. Some inmates eventually leave death row without an execution. Sentences may be overturned, reduced, or commuted following new evidence, legal rulings, or changes in law. These cases are rare, but they demonstrate that death row is not always the final destination it appears to be. For others, the legal process reaches its end. When appeals are exhausted and no stays remain, an execution date becomes final. At that point, the system transitions from waiting to preparation. And it is at this stage that Polunsky's role becomes especially visible, because it is where death row ends and the final procedures begin. When all legal options are exhausted and an execution date becomes final, the routine at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit changes in subtle but significant ways. Procedures become more formal. Timelines are fixed. Responsibilities are reassigned. The system moves from long-term confinement to final preparation. Polunsky does not carry out executions. Instead, it serves as the last place of residence for Texas death row inmates until a scheduled transfer. That transfer typically occurs days before the execution date and follows a strict protocol developed by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. The inmate is informed through official notice. Mental health staff conduct evaluations to confirm legal competency. Property is inventoried. Documentation is reviewed multiple times to ensure accuracy. These steps are procedural, designed to reduce error in a process that allows none. The transfer itself is controlled and quiet. The inmate is moved under escort to the Huntsville unit, where Texas carries out executions. There is no announcement inside Polunsky beyond what policy requires. For the remaining inmates, the absence is often the only signal that a transfer has occurred. At Huntsville, the environment is different. Unlike Polunsky, which is built for long-term housing, Huntsville's role is temporary and highly specialized. The inmate is placed in a holding cell near the execution chamber. Final visits, if approved, occur there. Legal counsel may file last-minute motions. Courts remain open to receive them. For staff, this period carries additional responsibility. Every step is documented. Multiple agencies coordinate. Training emphasizes adherence to protocol, not personal judgment. The goal is consistency and compliance with the law as written. Public attention often peaks at this stage. Media coverage increases. Protests and vigils may occur outside the prison. Inside, operations continue according to schedule, insulated from public reaction as much as possible. If a stay is granted, the process reverses. The inmate is returned to Polunsky, and the system resets. If not, the execution proceeds as ordered by the court. Polunsky's involvement ends at the transfer, but its role in the overall system remains central. The existence of this final transfer highlights a defining feature of Texas death row. Polunsky is not just a prison. It is a waiting place, one that holds individuals between sentence and outcome, sometimes for decades. And it is here that broader questions about punishment, responsibility, and institutional design begin to converge. Psychological and system analysis. Life on Texas death row, as structured at the Allan B. Polunsky Unit, reflects deliberate policy choices rather than accidental conditions. The system prioritizes control, predictability, and security. These priorities shape every aspect of daily life, from housing design to human interaction. From a psychological standpoint, long-term death row confinement creates a distinct mental environment. Inmates are separated not only from society, but from each other. This level of isolation reduces violence and simplifies supervision, but it also removes social feedback that normally helps regulate behavior and emotional health. Studies cited in court proceedings have shown that prolonged isolation can intensify stress responses. In the Polunsky setting, the absence of meaningful activity and human contact can lead to cognitive dulling, emotional flattening, and difficulty managing time perception. Days blur together. Weeks lose definition. The future becomes abstract. The certainty of sentence combined with uncertainty of timing adds another layer. Unlike life sentences, death row includes a fixed outcome with an unknown date. Psychologists describe this as a state of indefinite anticipation, which can increase anxiety and reduce motivation. Some inmates disengage. Others fixate on legal developments as their primary source of hope or structure. Institutionally, Polunsky operates with limited flexibility. Policies are designed for consistency across cases. Individual adaptation is minimal. This uniformity reduces discretion, which in turn reduces legal risk for the institution. However, it also limits the system's ability to respond to individual mental health needs beyond basic care. Correctional staff are also shaped by the system. Working in an environment centered on permanent confinement and eventual execution requires emotional distancing. Training emphasizes professionalism and rule adherence. Over time, this can protect staff from burnout, but it can also reduce opportunities for humane engagement. From a public policy perspective, Polunsky represents the practical reality of capital punishment. Court decisions and legislative votes result in daily routines that last for decades. The prison becomes the physical space where abstract legal authority meets human experience. Critics argue that the psychological effects amount to an additional, unexamined punishment. Supporters argue that the conditions are necessary to ensure safety and uphold lawful sentences. Courts have largely deferred to state authority, recognizing the harshness of death row while stopping short of declaring it unconstitutional. What remains clear is that Polunsky functions exactly as designed. It is stable, controlled, and resistant to change. Its impact on inmates, staff, and public perception unfolds slowly, measured not in days or months, but in years. And with that understanding, the final question becomes unavoidable. What does the existence of a place like this say about the justice system that created it? The Allan B. Polunsky Unit was not designed to tell a story. It was designed to carry out a function of law, quietly and consistently. Yet over time, it has become a symbol of how justice is enforced when punishment reaches its most final form. Inside its walls, life continues in a controlled routine shaped by policy, appeals, and waiting. For inmates, time stretches forward without normal milestones. For staff, professionalism replaces emotion. For the public, the prison remains mostly unseen, known more by reputation than reality. Polunsky shows that capital punishment is not a single moment. It is a long process that unfolds over decades, affecting mental health, institutional culture, and public trust. Decisions made in courtrooms translate into years of confinement under conditions that few people ever witness directly. This does not simplify the debate around the death penalty. Instead, it grounds that debate in real structures and real consequences. Understanding how death row operates is essential to understanding what capital punishment truly means in practice. Whether viewed as necessary, flawed, or deeply contested, the system exists. And places like Polunsky are where its impact is lived out every day, far from headlines and public attention. The purpose of this documentary is not to persuade, but to inform, to replace assumption with documentation, to encourage awareness rather than reaction. Because only by understanding how the system works can society make informed decisions about whether it should remain the same or change. If you found this documentary informative, consider liking the video, subscribing for more factual crime and prison history content, and sharing your thoughts respectfully in the comments.